Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is arguably the ultimate financial mystery surrounding the single most talked about company in the world right now. We're looking at an organization that literally started out just trying to build rockets, right? But today, they're launching astronauts, deploying military infrastructure, and seriously pursuing Mars colonization. But for all of those literal moonshots, the absolute central question we need to answer today is this. Is the company's astronomical valuation actually justified? Or is the market just getting completely ahead of reality? Let's get right into it. To really grasp the scale of this mystery, we've got to start with this absolutely staggering number, roughly $2.1 trillion. Guys, SpaceX is now worth more than the entire economic output of whole countries, like Canada or Italy. It's more valuable than several of the top Fortune 500 companies put together. It is just an immense amount of wealth and, frankly, expectation placed on a single private company. And it immediately begs the question, how did we even get here?
Which leads us to a pretty glaring paradox. How in the world can a company that's projected to have a $4.9 billion net loss in 2025 be worth trillions of dollars? Because despite that massive $2.1 trillion valuation, they're only projecting around $18.7 billion in revenue for the year. Now, in the traditional finance world, bleeding nearly $5 billion, that would trigger absolute alarm bells. But here, investors are practically lining up around the block. Look at the stark contrast between SpaceX and the established tech giants. Every other trillion-dollar company you look at, Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, they generate enormous profits, they have super mature business models, and they just print cash. Apple brings in around $123 billion in profit alone. Microsoft has those incredibly lucrative cloud margins. And then you look at SpaceX. They generate just a tiny fraction of that revenue and operate at a massive loss. What this proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that investors are paying strictly for future potential. They do not care about current cash flow.
So to understand why investors have so much faith in that future potential, we really need a quick history lesson. When Elon Musk founded the company back in 2002, success was, well, it was incredibly unlikely. Actually, their first 3 launches failed completely. They were right on the brink of total bankruptcy. But then, a pivotal NASA contract swooped in and provided a critical lifeline. And from those really scrappy near-death early days, they executed with just incredible precision. They transformed into the most successful launch company in history, pioneered reusable rockets, and now they completely dominate global launch frequency. So here's the crucial point. We have to completely flip our mental model. If we keep viewing SpaceX purely through the lens of, selling space on rockets, that $2.1 trillion number is never going to make sense. To understand where all this money is actually going, we have to look way past the launch pad. Most people still assume SpaceX makes all its money launching the Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and commercial payloads. But check this out. Starlink's satellite internet service actually dwarfs their famous rocket launch business. Starlink is projected to bring in $11.4 billion compared to just $5 billion for commercial launch services. Meanwhile, those vital government contracts with NASA, the Pentagon, and intelligence agencies, they pull in another $2 billion. But the huge takeaway here is that the internet business is literally more than double the size of the rocket business. Mind-blowing, right? And that's because Starlink isn't just some niche product for people living off the grid in a cabin somewhere. It is a monumental global infrastructure play. Think about it. There are currently around 5.5 billion internet users in the world today, but the potential market is all 8 billion humans. Sure, Starlink targets remote communities, but it also provides connectivity for huge commercial maritime ships navigating the oceans. It connects global airlines, military organizations. And looking ahead, this network could literally be the backbone for autonomous vehicles and drones flying worldwide. Let's just do the ultimate bull case math for Starlink here. Imagine if they capture just a tiny fraction of the globe. Let's say 100 million subscribers. If those users are paying an average of $100 a month, that translates to a staggering $120 billion in annual revenue. A business generating that kind of cash would instantly eclipse dozens of Fortune 50 mainstays. That is the sheer massive scale investors are visualizing when they look at this company. And that brings us to the second pillar of their immense value, the launch cost revolution. Historically, getting things into space was just prohibitively expensive. The space shuttle costs an estimated $54,000 per kilogram just to get to orbit. SpaceX's Falcon 9 brought that all the way down to about $2,500. But the goal for their fully reusable Starship, they want to slash that cost to under $200 per kilogram.
This isn't just an improvement, it's an exponential cost reduction. It's fundamentally similar to how semiconductor microchips made computing dirt cheap and literally unlocked the modern tech era. So why does a sub $200 per kilogram launch cost matter so much? Simply put, it unlocks entirely new, totally sci-fi sounding industries that just aren't economically viable at today's prices. We are talking about building orbital data centers for AI training, zero-gravity manufacturing for advanced materials, space tourism, asteroid mining, and crazy deep space logistics like lunar bases and Mars colonization. Lowering that barrier to entry basically creates a brand new hidden space economy. And it is truly awe-inspiring to think about. This idea really captures the absolute core of the $2 trillion valuation. Investors do not think they are buying shares in a rocket manufacturer. No way. They believe SpaceX is going to be the foundational infrastructure layer of the entire 21st century space economy. If space becomes a major global economic sector, SpaceX is perfectly positioning itself to be the toll road, the transportation network, and the communications backbone, all rolled into one.
Okay, everything we just discussed sounds totally incredible, but it is definitely time for a reality check. Are investors just wearing rose-colored glasses here? Are they blindly assuming that all of these highly complex, ridiculously ambitious future plans are going to execute flawlessly without a single hitch? To actually quantify that risk, let's look at a pretty sobering metric, the price-to-sales ratio. This just compares a company's market cap to its revenue. Established giants trade at, reasonable multiples. Amazon is sitting around 4 times sales. Even Nvidia, the absolute darling of the AI boom, is around 25 times sales. But SpaceX? Investors are currently paying an enormous 112 times sales. That is far, far more per dollar of revenue than you'd pay for literally any major, highly profitable technology company operating today. So, objectively, we've got to lay out the bear case here. First off, as we saw, that $18.7 billion in revenue is just way too small to support a $2 trillion valuation in any traditional sense, especially when you're operating at an estimated $4.9 billion net loss. Second, Starship faces some severe technical risks. If it takes longer to commercialize, all those giant future revenue assumptions could just collapse. And hey, competition isn't standing still either. Companies like Rocket Lab, Blue Origin, and even national efforts from China are accelerating fast. The biggest risk here is that the current valuation leaves absolutely zero room for error. It assumes total, absolute success.
In fact, if you look at how financial analysts actually model the company's fair value, a pretty stark picture emerges. A standard base case puts the fair value somewhere between $700 billion and $1 trillion. Even under the absolute most aggressive, highly optimistic bull case models, predicting up to $1.4 trillion, the current market cap still blows right past those estimates. The current reality of $2.1 trillion is priced far, far beyond even the most optimistic standard financial models. So drawing directly from the source data, the investment thesis basically splits perfectly down the middle. On the one side, the bull argument sees a company that completely dominates the global satellite internet and launch markets, right? Achieving this massive, monopoly-like position with immense future optionality. But on the flip side, the bear argument warrants that this is a deeply overpriced, wildly expensive, and, for now, unprofitable venture. Ultimately, buying into this valuation means you are betting on decades of flawless execution. But doubting it means you're betting against a company with unprecedented historical momentum. To put all of this into historical context, just think back to how the market has behaved in the past. In 2005, a lot of people thought internet growth was slowing down, completely underestimating the e-commerce explosion right before companies like Amazon changed the entire world. In 2010, people thought smartphones were a mature, boring market, literally just before Apple and Nvidia exploded. So as we look at 2025 and beyond, the ultimate question the bulls are asking is this: are we making the exact same mistake again by underestimating space infrastructure as the next major economic platform? Which brings us to our final thought. Is this current $2.1 trillion valuation a historic, overheated bubble built purely on sci-fi dreams, or is it literally the dawn of a multi-trillion-dollar space economy? 20 years from now, will SpaceX be remembered as the next NVIDIA that completely redefined global infrastructure, or simply the most expensive growth story ever created? That, my friends, is the trillion-dollar question. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helped clarify the fascinating mechanics behind the world's most talked about valuation.